Hi, it's Rob from the Brush and Boltgun. Today I'm going to be doing a quick tutorial on how to paint a Nurgle Plaguebearer. If you'd like to support us, our Coffee and Patreon pages are linked below. Now on to the video. So first we're going to use some Citadel Mephiston Red. I'm going to use this to do all the open wounds and that area around the Nurgling, which is on the inside of the stomach. Now when we're doing this miniature, I'm going to be using Deathguard Green as the skin tone. Now when I'm painting them usually, I also use Citadel Nurgling Green and also Citadel Skarsnik Green for skin tones, just to give them all a bit of a variety of different manky looking greens. So I'll post up some other little recipes you can use to do the skin in the description below the video. So once you've got all the wounds and everything like that painted with the red, we can move on to Citadel Nurgling Green, and we're just going to use this to paint the Nurgling. Now, depending on which one you're doing, if you're doing one that's got all the innards and stuff hanging out the front, I'll link up the innards video, or a couple of them to be honest, just so that you can see the kind of thing that you can do with those. Next up, Citadel Rakarth Flesh. I'm going to use this to do the bone horn and also his teeth. You can do the Nurgling's teeth and the fingernails and toenails too. Next up, Citadel Leadbelcher. I'm going to use this to do the Plague Sword. Do this as a big rusty shard of metal. In the past I've done these in sort of like a piece of obsidian or something along those lines too. There's loads of different ways you can paint these up. We're just going to go for a big rusty bit of metal for this one. As well as doing the different skin tones, you can also use different coloured shades. I use pretty much every coloured shade you can imagine just to get a hint of different colours in all the Plaguebearers, so when they're all together they're not all the same. Now I'm going to use a little bit of Vallejo White. I'm going to use this just to paint his eye. Like so. And now a little bit of Dorn Yellow from Citadel. Just going to use this to paint all of those boils and pustules and get them looking a bit manky. I don't particularly have to paint these on now. If you wanted to, you could wait till after the shades have gone on. I like to paint them on just now so that you can see where they are when you come to reapply the colours and things like that. But there isn't really a necessity to do it in this order if you wanted to just wait until you've done the shades and done the skin and then put the yellow on, because you'll be using a red wash to make it look sore around the wound, and that'll kind of blend it in with the green anyway, so you don't really need to do it straight away. So with the Nurgling, I'll link up a video of how I paint Nurglings 2 here. I'm using Casandora yellow to give that a sort of like sickly yellow colour, but you can again use lots of different shades to get a different hint of colour to the Nurgling. I'm going to use Citadel Druchii Violet, and you're going to use this in all the wounds and the open mouths around the teeth on the Plaguebearer 2. It just gives that nice deep colour for the wounds and makes them look that little bit darker and that little bit mankier. Next up, Citadel Nuln Oil. I'm going to use this just to give a quick wash over the Leadbelcher that you put on the blade. Like so. And Citadel Seraphim Sepia. I use this on the bone, so his teeth, the horn on the front of his head, his fingernails and toenails. See here that I've started doing the base too. I'm going to do a little video on how I do these bases just to show you the idea behind it. Now I'm going to be using Citadel Athonian Camoshade. going to use this to shade all of his skin. As I say, you can use any for this. I've used like Casandora yellow, Fuegan orange, Carroburg crimson, Drakenhof nightshade. Basically any shade you can think of, you can use it to make a different coloured skin tone. So I'll link up a couple of posts on the blog about painting Plaguebearers and different ways that you can make them look that little bit different without doing very much change at all. Different coloured shades, different coloured skin tones, that kind of thing. Now I'm going to use Citadel Deathguard green. We're going to start reapplying the colour. It's at this point that you can use the Skarsnik green instead, or the Nurgling green, depending on what shade you want to have the skin on the Plaguebearers. Now I'm going to add a little bit of white to the Deathguard green. I'm going to start applying highlights to these areas. When you're doing this, you want to be applying the highlight to the top edges of the skin and on any ridges and things like that. Just give the impression that light is catching the top of them and illuminating them. It's good that rather than having very smooth skin or anything like that, they've got tons of little details and lumps and bumps and little ridges and creases and all kinds of stuff going on, so you can make this look quite good by highlighting the top edges. Next up, we're going to add a little bit more white to the previous mix. We're going to do one final highlight to the skin, doing exactly what we've done before but leaving some of the previous layers showing. If you are using the other greens I mentioned earlier to do the skin, you can just keep adding white to them as well, as we've done with this. So one layer of, say, Skarsnik, add a bit of white, add a bit more white, or the same with the Nurgling green. But if you want to have a look at different techniques and different colours that you can achieve with shades and different skin tones, as I say, there is quite a few on the blog. I think there's about 9 different types for each. It's worth having a look if you fancy that. So returning to the Citadel Mephiston Red here, and we're just going to add a tiny little bit of red to some of the wounds just to brighten them back up again. We've now got that darkness in the recesses from the Druchii Violet, so we can add a little bit of Mephiston Red to this just to get it a little bit brighter. Now it's Citadel Rakarth Flesh. We're going to reapply some of the bone colour to the teeth, the horn and the fingernails. With the horns I always try and do it so there's like little ridges going up and down it. Now we're going to mix some Citadel Ushabti bone with the Citadel Rakarth Flesh, just to give us that nice kind of mid-tone between the Rakarth Flesh and the bone colour. So again, trying to get those kind of striations in the horn on the top there. This time we're using some pure Ushabti bone. Just going to do tiny little highlights on the various parts of them that we've been painting with these colours. Like so. Now finally going to use a little bit of white mixed in with the previous mix and just do a final little highlight on the horn. With that done, we're going to move on to the eye. So you usually go from the nose outwards. As he hasn't got a nose, you're just going to go from one side of the eye to the other. like so. Like so. Now I'm going to use a little bit of Vallejo Black just to do the spot in the eye. Like so. Moving on to the Nurgling now, we're going to start using Nurgling Green. If you are doing Plaguebearers in a different colour and using this as a skin tone, the skin tone that we're doing on the Nurgling is going to be like the skin tone I have used on some of my Plaguebearers too. I'm going to add a little bit of white mixed in with the Nurgling Green. So again, thinking about where the light's going to be catching this little fella as he's poking his head out. You want to be highlighting those areas, leaving some of the previous colours on display below. Now we're just going to use a little bit of white and black just to do the eyes. Now the reason I'm only doing one layer of highlights on the skin here is because we are going to be putting a bit of blood for the blood god on there, which will take it away and you won't really be able to tell how many highlights are on the skin once you've done that. So just going to quickly do the eyes here. We can move on to the next colour. I'm going to use a tiny little bit of Citadel Pink Horror. All we're going to do here is do some spots of colour on his tongue just to make that stand out a little bit more. And give it a bit of a, almost like a texture because you're just doing little spots rather than a smooth streak. Back onto the Dorn Yellow. So if you didn't paint the boils and stuff earlier on, this is the point that you would paint them up. You just put a nice bit of Dorn Yellow onto each of the wounds or around the tops of any of the open ones. Now I'm going to use some Vallejo Red Wash. Now I use this one to go around all of the wounds, and it just gives you that kind of sore reddened look. A little bit off camera there, sorry. But if you put that around each of the wounds, it just makes it look that little bit tender and a bit sore. Discolours it, gives it that nice shade without getting rid of all the colour beneath it. It doesn't paint over it and make it look like it is just red or that kind of pinky colour. It does just add a hint of colour to the green of the skin. If you want it to be slightly redder around the very edges, you can add another layer of that too. So next up, a little bit of Citadel Carroburg Crimson. I'm going to start doing some streaks of gore coming from all of the open wounds. So I'm using a Citadel small layer brush here to do really thin lines running down from each of the wounds. Next up, a little bit of Citadel Seraphim Sepia. Going to work on the blade of the sword now. So you're going to be giving this a reasonable coat because it's all rotted and rusted. We're just going to give most of this a coat of the Seraphim Sepia just to get that yellowed up as though it is all starting to rot. Once that's dry, we are going to use a little bit of Citadel Agrax Earthshade just to darken down those areas that you want to add the Typhus Corosion to. It's mainly in the recesses here. I've got sort of quite a few little dents and buckles in it and things like that, and you want to be just kind of putting the Agrax Earthshade mainly around there. So now we're going to be using some Citadel Typhus Corosion. Mainly adding this into the recesses on the dents kind of thing. Because the ridges and the sharp point bits are going to be dry brushed with a bit of Leadbelcher surely. Because obviously when ramming a rusted bit of metal into something, it is going to scrape away that top layer of rust. Now using a little bit of Citadel Ryza Rust just to dry brush that onto the Typhus corrosion areas. And what that does is catch onto the textured parts of it and give it these little raised orange sections that do look like little pieces of rust that are crumbling away from the blade. I'll link up a video here of how I do the rust usually, so you can see that on a bigger scale. For the final colour for the blade, using a little bit of Citadel Fuegan Orange. And you're just going to put this over some of the areas you put the Ryza Rust, and this gives that orange discoloration that you get on rusty areas, like so. Now I'm going to use a tiny little bit of Citadel Gloss Varnish while we're waiting for that shade to dry. I'm just going to use this and paint inside the mouth, and the eye, and the inside of all the big open wounds. Now he has just been sprayed with a little bit of matte varnish here, so that's why we're putting the gloss varnish on first, or putting the gloss varnish on now I should say, because he's already had the rest of the matte varnish sprayed on, so now we can use the glossy colours over the top of that, and they will keep the gloss, because if you do them first and spray with the matte varnish it will mattify all those. Now I'm going to use some Citadel Blood for the Blood God as the final thing. I'm going to use this to drip down and run down all of the body. As I say, I'm going to show you how to do the bases that I have, you can see here, because you usually would like to use these for Age of Sigmar, so they've got the kind of grassy front and then it's going to be all swampy behind, and so as they're walking along it's just corrupting all the ground that they're walking on. With that done, that is the finished Plaguebearer. I am really happy with how he turned out. I do love the Plaguebearers, and if you've seen the picture on Instagram you'll see they've got quite a few. They all look pretty horrific, but I think it does them quite good justice. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future content. Also, think about subscribing to our other social media, linked below. Thanks. If you like the channel and you enjoy the content and you'd like to support us, our Ko-fi and Patreon pages are linked below. Thanks very much.